everyone in government right now needs to process changes faster than ever, more decisions than ever, with more information than has ever existed in human history. That is a really changed landscape. And so I think for me, I get excited, about what is it that each individual user can really bring to their mission on this journey.
Welcome to Management Matters. I'm James-Christian Blockwood. This week's episode explores the transformative role of artificial intelligence in shaping the future of work, life, and career transitions. We will be discussing emerging technologies and how they're redefining professional pathways, enhancing public service, and preparing federal employees for what's next. Our guests today are two experts in innovation and workforce transformation. Alexis Bonnell is a fellow of the Academy and serves as partnership manager at OpenAI, where she leverages AI to advance areas such as research, science, innovation, and national security. Karen Lee is the co-founder of FedsForward, a collaborative initiative that empowers federal employees to shape the future of public service by fostering innovation, leadership, and workforce transformation. Welcome to you both.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Alexis and Karen, I always like to start with the broad view. I actually want to back up a little bit and have you both define artificial intelligence and talk about what it means to you and how you're using it in your organizations. Alexis, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So for me, what is really interesting, I'm going to actually, if it's okay, put on my last hat as a Govy and then also wear my current hat at OpenAI. I think for me, what was really dramatically different about AI, artificial intelligence, and to me, it's really this idea of a relationship with knowledge at speed and scale. And what was so unique was if we think about almost any other technology that, a chief information officer like I would roll out, we really think in terms of enterprise. And what that means often is kind of one size fits all. So the nerd part of me thinks about this a little bit like, if you like Star Wars, like the stormtrooper suits, right? Everyone's in a stormtrooper suit. This is how we're going to use this particular tech. This is what it's going to look like. I think what is so special about AI, and we don't talk about it enough, is it's really the first technology that adapts to the user. And so, my nerd analogy would be it's more of like an Avenger suit. And I think this is really important because if you think about it, every single public servant was hand selected, right, to be in the role and the mission and the incredible work that they do. And they each bring unique expertise and experience and style. And there's a reason why they are there contributing to these incredible missions. And so what excites me about AI, and I think where it's going, is this idea of really being able to unlock the potential of each of those amazing public servants in a new, different, and unique way. And so I think about it a little bit as like my power processor. Like everyone in government right now needs to process changes faster than ever, more decisions than ever, with more information than has ever existed in human history. That is a really changed landscape. And so I think for me, I get excited, about what is it that each individual user can really bring to their mission on this journey. I think the other quick note I would say is one of the most unique things I found is the people who are great with AI are often not the ones you expect. And I'll give you an example. One of the groups that we found is just really talented with AI, going from maybe a basic querier to a more advanced querier really quickly, is moms. And if you think about it, a lot of times people think you must have STEM skills or you must have those types of traditional data backgrounds. But what makes moms so effective is, first of all, they're used to saying things like, let me ask that question in a different way, or maybe I haven't gotten the whole story. But what's most powerful is that they really have a benevolent mindset to the human-machine teaming that AI brings. And what that means is that they and kind of the AI adapt to each other more quickly, surprisingly, than sometimes other groups. And so I think what's really exciting to me about AI is the fact that everyone has a chance for the first time to be a technologist in their organization.
Alexis, it's great to hear your perspective on AI, especially coming from where you sat in government, but also now at OpenAI. And to James-Christian, your question, At FedsForward, we think of it with two different use cases, one more external facing and one internal facing to the organization. With respect to the federal transitions, the external facing use case of AI is that we're now in an age and an era where moving cross sectors, that is to say, moving from the federal sector to the non-federal sector, does not have as tall of walls as may have been in the past, because we can leverage AI to help understand and more quickly acclimate to the new sectors in which we're landing, from federal to private, federal to nonprofit, to understand business models, technical jargon, business processes, how we engage in that organizational environment, so that we as feds, as we transition to extending our service in those other sectors, can aptly apply our skills and experience in a way that resonates. So AI kind of speeds up or hastens that acculturation process. Internal to FedsForward, we're using AI in order to facilitate those cross-sector moves. So we've trained a large language model, the first and only that exists, that understands the civil servant, to be able to digest what we as civil servants have done in the federal government and translate that into specific skills as applied in private, nonprofit, academia, and other sectors. That enables us as federal professionals to be able to not only understand what our value is as applied to another sector, but then enable us to target particular roles with precision as we think about how to extend that service. That targeting is really important because it's not simply a matter of lifting and shifting our job in the Fed side to a non-federal sector, but really understanding how we can use those skills in a different way. And by knowing where we could go, it leads us to be able to research those roles and candidly figure out whether for us as professionals, if that's the right fit. Finally, AI is just extraordinary as we are at FedsForward working to do intelligent matching between federal professionals and employers. At its core, there is a historic translation problem of talent as we move from one sector to the other. The talent, in this case, the federal talent, we just don't know how to speak in the language elegantly and quickly in a way that employers who need our talent would understand. And so too, on the other side of the market, employers may not know how to frame their jobs, those descriptions and their needs in a way that feds would say, I know how to do that. And so we're using large language models to enable that translation, but then also to enable an intelligent matching so that ultimately we can optimize this movement of public service talent out of government and back in.
And, Karen, if I can rip off you for a minute, I love this idea, first of all, of the fact that we're whole humans, right? And the thing I love about AI is in some levels, it's about a will to almost see yourself. I think about it a little bit of like, who is like Alexis 2.0, right? And to your point, people have skills and talents. And sometimes I've always been surprised in going in and being able to interact with great AI tools, how it can give you almost a different perspective of yourself. And I think we see that going even from technology roles into government and back and forth. I think one of the most interesting elements of this is how, almost our own sense of identity can get quite restricted when we think about who we are and the value we can provide in the world. And I love the idea of your organization leaning in and helping almost I think about it a little bit like instead of just looking at a direct mirror, you almost are in that room where you have all of these different views, of yourself and all of this potential. So that's really exciting.
Yeah. And I think to your point, the value of AI is that because it can crawl across all of the publicly available data, it can reflect back to you opportunities and insights that you might never know because you just haven't been in those worlds. I think the other thing that's really powerful about what we're on the precipice for is that the opportunity to have talent mobilized across sectors, where historically the talent has stayed in one sector because the learning curve of the technical components of a sector are so steep because of just the complexity, be it in federal government, in corporate, and wherever. That has sometimes been too high of a barrier to overcome to learn all of those technical components. Using AI, we can leverage it in a very smart way to be able to very quickly learn those as we apply skills that really require time and experience. I think there's an opportunity to leverage this to unlock talent so that it is mobilized across sectors and lift up the American economy because we're able to move talent in ways that our economy has never seen before.
Sometimes people actually have quite a lot of skills, but they don't credit themselves with what they've learned or what they can do.
It's clear that artificial intelligence is having an impact on how we live, how we learn, how we work. Karen, you mentioned that the walls aren't as high as they previously were, but I imagine there's still some barriers. And Alexis, you mentioned that some of the people that are using AI may not be the people that you're expecting. What are public servants doing to upskill? What are the opportunities they have to learn more about how to integrate AI in their current roles? And what are federal agencies doing to support that growth in their development and their learning with AI tools?
This is my favorite part. I should be transparent that my role in OpenAI grew a little bit to not only run this incredible partnership, but also to be able to champion AI adoption in government writ large. AI is something, as Karen kind of alluded to, there's no barrier to start using it, right? So even if your agency hasn't put it in place yet, you can have a free personal account, right? You can just get going. And so I think it doesn't matter if the tech is there if people don't use it. And so one of the things we've tended to say to folks as they've been coming through these trainings is like, first of all, you don't get fit by reading a book on working out. You can just start to explore. And I think it's been really, exciting to see people realize that their skills and experiences deserve not only respect, but deserve the investment of these types of time and tools that let them bring, kind of even more to the mission.
And so where, unlike you, Alexis, I'm a technology phobe. I'm the person when text messaging came out, it took me a really long time to understand why I would do that rather than pick up the phone. So as a late adopter, I'll say AI framed as something that I have to learn, or for those in public service who are listening, that where you feel like you have to learn it, you must try it, you must get upskilled. I'll say for myself, that sounds very scary and daunting. The way I've looked at AI personally, but also as we're moving forward with FedsForward to enable these public service transitions in and out of government, is things that the use case that I find very comfortable is where it is something I know how to do. I already know how to do it. And so it's a tool to let me just have it done. So some very basic use cases are summarizing meetings. Because I know what happened. I was there. We were all there. But it takes time to type it up and make it sound like it's in the right tone. Some of those very basic administrative processes of a welcome note where it's just some specific tasks that need to get done, or candidly organizing my thoughts. I use it very typically for my own organizational process where there are things I know I need to get done, but I'm not quite sure the right approach or the right ordering. And I could think it through, but it might be a little faster. To me, the safe way that I've tried to use it is not as a replacement for my thinking, but a tool for efficacy to shorten the time frame. Almost, I think of it as a very junior staffer who I get to dictate to, back my thoughts, for which then I will review and make final decisions. And so as public servants, as we do our administration, there is so much administrative work that needs to get done, if nothing else, to document decisions, to be able to lay out options where we already know what they are, but we need to be able to communicate them. To the extent we are already great writers and we have already creatively thought of those options, AI could be used really just to get us over the finish line to get that final product, as opposed to do all the thinking. I think that is one thing that could be very easy, very low stakes, but really add to the efficacy of delivering the business of government.
I love that. And I think you're really spot on in a couple of different ways. One, toil reduction or starting with things that you're comfortable with doing are such great confidence boosters. One of the ways that I thought about it was this concept of minutes on mission. Like how is it that I can use AI to have less minutes on the things that I know to do and build up confidence, but really have more minutes on the mission of why I was so compelled to be in public service. The other thing that I would love to add is in my last role, I got to work with just some incredible defense and national security leaders and try to take them a little bit on that AI journey. And to your point of doing something that I think it is absolutely true that people can feel quite intimidated, right? When they're told you must do this, you have to do this, everyone will be doing that. And the most effective first prompt that I found with those groups was actually like telling them to write a love letter, right? Because these were really they're incredible people, incredible humans. They probably realize they don't always, think about or have the moment to acknowledge or take care of their partner or spouse. And just that human factor of write a love letter, you could almost see them physically just relax, right? And be kind of a little mystified by what popped up on the screen and be able to go back and forth with it. And I think that sometimes when we think about technology, we don't think about it in the way that you did, which is just, what do I know? How do I want to exist here? What might I do? And I think we need to let more people know, it's okay just to start.
And Alexis, you mentioned prompts, and I learned it took me a while to learn the art of prompting. After realizing that was a job, a prompt engineer. So when I was at MITRE, I had an opportunity just to start interviewing people and ask them, how do you do that? Because I realized that a good prompt will lead to an amazing result. A basic one will lead you to nothing. And one of the things, just as another use case to offer to those in public service and public administration, one of the things I started doing was creating prompts that were very long to essentially game out outcomes based on personas. And so it really was feeding literally pages sometimes of information of what the scenario was and past decisions, and then teeing up an issue and having the AI see the patterns in how previous decisions were made to then offer potential outcomes based on the options presented. And as I became better and better at that, James-Christian, to your question at the very beginning, this could be a really intriguing way as public servants for us to really think through in terms of the administration of government and some of those very managerial questions, to be able to envision and foresee how implementation will roll out based on past experience, with the note that you have to feed in, we say data, but really it's just what happened before and why. And that's where I think there is this amazing opportunity to unlock for those in public administration, the ability to see what might happen in the future based on different scenarios, and candidly do some real life sensitivity analysis that beforehand would have required a lot of systems engineering and gaming.
You both have provided really good advice on how to use AI, and you certainly provided good use cases. You've given some that are more basic uses of AI, but there's also seriously complicated and complex uses and even development of AI happening in government. I'm hoping to dispel a myth here with my next question. Is AI knowledge and application in government better, worse, or the same as it is in the private sector? Karen, maybe you can fill us in from your perspective, and then Alexis, anything you have to add from your OpenAI perspective would be good as well.
In government, we're trained to be risk adverse and to take our time with adoption of new technologies, in part because we don't know what some of those negative externalities are. And so I would say that, where we are still on the precipice on the federal government side of how we use and adopt it, that is not per se a bad thing, because it does give some time to understand what some of the inherent biases are that might come from pulling information from AI. But that said, I think there's this extraordinary opportunity to this conversation for how to make very explicit across the federal sector of some of these use cases, ones that are very low stakes, that can bring efficacy in government, to ones on the other side of the spectrum that are a little riskier, that as we use AI to do those will require some additional internal controls to determine whether or not we move out and what we find from those. I think what's wonderful about this conversation is that we can learn on the public administration side and government from what private sector is doing. And the more we bring talent in and out of government, the more fluid that learning curve becomes, and candidly less steep because we'll learn as we move.
I think your last point really hits home for me, Karen. I am someone who started with the, international kind of public service, which was with the UN, came into USAID, went to Google, then went back to DoD, and then, now have come to OpenAI. And those changes back and forth were so valuable on so many levels. And I think when we think about this technology, first of all, government isn't an industry of industries, really, right? So anything that the commercial side or the corporate side is doing usually has some root relevance back to, what government does. So it's really neat to kind of cross-pollinate that. I would say one of the advantages that, sometimes companies and corporate and private sector can have are they have very, very clear designations of success or metrics or other things. And so it can be easier for them to see those as kind of low-hanging fruit that they want to be able to adapt. That being said, I think that what I tend to see is, sometimes to Karen's point, there's a feeling of risk, or maybe we want to navigate something more from a collective experience and have things like AI committees, et cetera. And so sometimes what happens is we can over-index on the idea of use cases, meaning that we're going to be very formal and very intentional about what we're going to use the AI for, which again, to Karen's point, sometimes that's really important. I will tell you though, the best stuff I've seen in government has been often, the use cases are amazing, but it's often that person, in fact, just last week, there was an acquisitions professional who was showing, me a GPT they created around the market research stage of acquisition. And this was not a formal use case, right? This was just a great acquisition professional saying, hey, here's where I think AI can make a difference. And they were telling me about, how first they just did it for themselves, but then, one colleague started to want to use it, another, until he had really hacked an entirely accurate, legitimate, and robust way of using AI. And it didn't require a formal case, right? It required someone who knew what their job was and who knew where it could be optimized and where AI might make a difference.
Karen, we've been talking a lot about the opportunity that AI brings, but clearly there are also challenges that may not reflect the current environment, or maybe it does. Can you give us your insight on what some of the risk, challenges, or things that people should be thinking about when it comes to AI?
Absolutely. The fundamental kind of basis of the technology of AI is that it pulls from publicly available information and sources. And so inherent in the bias of any analysis that comes is that it's based on what's been done before, what's already out there. It can't predict the future when there is something brand new that has never been seen in the way that we're seeing it. And so as we as public servants, those in public administration, seek to use it, we should always keep in the back of our minds that part of our job is actually changing what the current baseline is. And so recognizing that AI will never be able to anticipate what doesn't already exist and the reality we want to create. And so long as we keep that in mind, I think we will be able to responsibly use it with, I think, the training that we have in public service to be very risk conscious to serve on behalf of the American public.
Yeah, and I think just to add maybe two technical points, because I think this question of risk should always also have this question, as Karen talked about, risk mitigation. And I think one of the biggest challenges with AI is actually how much it changes. And so I'll give you two examples of that, or two ways to maybe mitigate, sometimes the risk that people see. To Karen's point, when someone goes into most of these large language models or AI, they'll ask a question. And to Karen's point, they are getting an answer based on really the collective knowledge, data and information that the model has access to, has been trained on. And one of the things that it often doesn't have is the incredible information that we actually work with in government every day. So I'll give you an example. I worked with the team who was supporting the F-35 or some other particular big projects. And if you think about it, the F-35 weekly program information or budget or, some of the other more discrete elements of that government program were not necessarily out in the public. And so I think one thing people should be aware of is what we call, and forgive me for the technical term, it's called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. And what's so exciting about that, and honestly, this is not something that is talked nearly about enough, is what RAG means is simply you can have that same curiosity, question, prompt related relationship with information, but you can actually add the information and tell the machine to only look at what you have added and not actually go out into the larger space. And if you think about it, what that means is that we can have insights or dashboards or other types of relationship with information that we are actually confident in, right? That we trust and that we work with every day. And so I think, it sounds very technical, but RAG just simply means telling the AI system, hey, pay attention to these documents, right? Or use this information. And so I think that ability, and this is what I mean when everyone gets to be a technologist. The second thing that changed pretty fundamentally in the last 6 months is, I think many of us involved in AI, there was a very common and appropriate refrain of how do I know what the model is doing, right? I ask this question and then all of a sudden it gives me the answer. And I think in the last 6 months, we have been able to bring reasoning models. And if you haven't had a chance to try a reasoning model, what is particular about reasoning models, and this is things like, in our case, O3 or deep research, what they allow you to do is not only pose your question or query, but then the AI actually tells you what it's going to do, where it's going to go, and the type of information that it's using in the result. And so I think, again, what was maybe a bit of a black box before, you can really use some of these tools to make a bit more transparent.
Alexis, you mentioned inherent bias. We talked about risk. What are some of the challenges that government and federal workers should be cautious of when using, applying, or thinking about artificial intelligence?
It's almost like know yourself first. So Karen made an interesting point earlier on, that was she starts with what she knows. And I think if you are a deep expert in something, then, you can query really robustly. You're probably familiar with the type of sources or the type of reasoning, that the AI might use. And you can be pretty robust in leaning in because as an expert in that, you may have a better sense if what you're getting back from the AI is probably appropriate for your mission. On the flip side, if you are, really exploring something that you don't have a lot of expertise or experience in, or you're really stretching, that's where you want to apply a little bit of caution, right? So to Karen's point of thinking about this like an intern or assistant, I wouldn't necessarily give an intern an assignment, get it back, not look at it, throw my logo on it, and just throw it out there, right? And so understanding, where your strengths and weaknesses are, and in that case, really saying, let me check these facts, let me check these sources, let me really make sure this is something that is appropriate, right, for me to put forward. I'll often say curate with abandon, but propagate with care. I think another element is, to recognize that I think about AI a lot as giving me options, not necessarily answers. And I think that maintaining that sense of agency, maintaining that sense of it is really like I, the human, who decides how to apply this relationship with knowledge is critical. And then the other one is to be really intentional about how you query. And what I mean by that is if I am considering a new policy, or like Karen's example, wanted to kind of go back, look in the past, and then project forward, I may have biases from my work, my experience, my different views on the world. And so if I intend to really want something that comes out of that's balanced, then I really have to query in a way that asks for that balance, right? Asks for both sides to be equally weighted. And so I think, my best advice is be very intentional, with this kind of power tool like you would any other. And I think, people will be well served by that.
Aaron, and my last question to you, whether you're a current public servant, whether you've recently separated, or whether you are someone who is inspired and will serve in the future, what is your best advice to ensure that person is ready for all of the challenges and requirements that may come?
My advice is going back to something Alexis said. At the end of the day, those in public service are extraordinarily talented and skilled. And so the question presented in terms of the future is not what to be prepared for, but instead, what do you want to do? And really, with specificity, what is the area of impact that you care about, the mission that drives you every day? Because in being pulled or pushed by that desire, you will naturally be curious to learn and grow in ways that will propel you forward and make you not only prepared, but make you lead. Those of us who've chosen the vocation of public service have given ourselves a deep gift, which is the opportunity and the ability to always set the course of our careers and our trajectory, because our North Star is the change that we want to see. We're already driven with a deep curiosity and drive to learn, to grow, to make the connections, to find the next organization in which to bring our talents.
We've talked about basic administration functions and applying AI. We've talked about custom GPTs, the art of prompting. Your insights are invaluable. You've helped us to understand this AI journey much better. Alexis, Karen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Management Matters is a presentation of the National Academy of Public Administration, produced by Lizzie Alwan and Matt Hampton, and edited by Matt Hampton.